Today is my birthday, a day we usually celebrate with a big barbecue. We typically invite only close relatives, friends, and familiar neighbors, but this year, the event seemed unusually grand and extravagant. To handle the feast, we bought extra grills and smokehouses. Even though it was my special day, I took on most of the cooking duties. My culinary skills weren't exceptional, but the results were decent enough. One perk of being the cook was always having a cold beer in my left hand, which kept me refreshed as I worked tirelessly over the grill. Now, the question arises, do you want to receive your birthday present now, or would you prefer to wait until the evening to find out what it is? A warm shower was already prepared for me when Ella, smiling broadly, greeted me at the bathroom door. "See you tonight, my dear," she purred. "In the meantime, I'm going down to help the boys." Christian, our 18-year-old son, was soon heading to Texas, followed by Calixta, a year younger, but already with a scholarship to Auburn. They were wonderful sons, largely thanks to Ella's upbringing. My contribution was providing a comfortable home and instilling a strong work ethic, but I regretted not being more attentive and sympathetic. We spent considerable time prepping the courtyard and terrace, ensuring everything was perfect. Then, we lit up the grills, deciding to start with ribs in the smokehouse. While hamburgers, hot dogs, and steaks could be cooked as needed, ribs required special attention. Christian expertly lit the smokehouse, and Calixta meticulously rubbed the meat with seasoning. Everything was going so smoothly that I almost felt I could sit back and let them handle it all. Just as we finished our preparations, Ella arrived with her two sisters to help. With over 50 guests expected, we had to prepare for a real celebration. It's always amusing how friends magically appear when there's free food. Despite being 40, I still felt the energy of a 20-year-old. Next month, Ella and I will celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary, a testament to the strength of our marriage. Our journey together has been fulfilling, even if our love life isn't as passionate as it once was. About a year ago, shortly after Ella started working, our relationship seemed to cool. The prospect of an empty nest drove her to seek companionship outside the home, which I understood as long as it made her happy. After working in the yard, the boys and I took a shower. I even had a new shirt ready, a gift from my mother earlier in the week. It wasn't my style, but wearing it felt obligatory. To be honest, I thought I looked like a Hawaiian pimp in those clothes. Ella wisely insisted I wear an apron, which turned out to be practical. Soon, the guests began arriving with plates of food, gifts, and drinks. The weather was perfect, promising a delightful day. Ella, as always, looked stunning and easily handled her role as hostess. Approaching 40, she maintained her youth and beauty effortlessly. With the boys soon leaving home, I looked forward to exotic weekends and unforgettable vacations with Ella. It was our chance to create cherished memories after years of dedicated parenting. Mesmerized, I watched Ella move gracefully among the guests, ensuring every detail was perfect. She embodied the ideal wife and mother, making me feel grateful. What more could a man want? Soon, everyone began enjoying the feast. Plates of delicious food appeared and disappeared in a whirlwind. Fortunately, most guests brought furniture, so seating wasn't an issue. Drinks were stored in coolers, with beer in one and soda in another. The cake waited patiently in the kitchen. Among the crowd, one person stood out. I couldn't place him, his face unfamiliar. A tall figure in a dark blue jacket stood at the edge of the party, exchanging words with a neighbor who then motioned to Ella. She approached, and he handed her an envelope from his jacket. "Ella Connors, you are being served," he said, then turned and left, as quietly as he came. The scene left everyone stunned. Ella froze, expressionless, glanced at me briefly, then retreated into the house. I stood silently, watching the lively chatter turn into hushed murmurs and whispers. As if trying to dispel the tension hanging in the air, I raised my voice and shouted, "Does anyone want more ribs? Go and get them!" Christian and Calixta quickly approached, joining me in the attempt to restore a semblance of normalcy. "What's going on, Dad?" Calixta asked cautiously. I could only shrug in response. Christian began to head towards the house, but I stopped him with a touch on the shoulder and a shake of my head. "Why don't you check if we need more drinks or beer?" I suggested, trying to distract them. Gradually, conversations in the courtyard resumed, and I felt a slight relief. but within 10 minutes, I knew I needed to talk to Ella. Before I could gather my thoughts, Calixta urgently intervened, his voice filled with concern. "Dad, Mom is leaving in a Mustang." He pointed to the front of the house, where I saw my black Mustang convertible speeding down the street. Everyone in the backyard turned to watch, and silence fell over the lively gathering. Ella never drove the Mustang. She usually preferred her minivan. But now, in her absence, the Mustang was her escape. Ella's sudden departure left many questions, but I knew they would wait until she returned. Unfortunately, the mood of the party soured. Her sister Lily brought out a cake, and I tried to muster some happiness, but her absence cast a shadow over the celebration. One by one, friends and neighbors left. Close family stayed longer, but eventually, there was nothing more to clean or wash. Surprisingly, no one mentioned Ella's departure, as if trying to preserve a sense of normality. Left alone with my sons, silence enveloped us. They looked at me, searching for answers, but I had none to offer. Sitting on the sofa, I watched them retreat to their bedrooms. Morning came, and Christian and Calixta were up early, returning borrowed grills and equipment to our neighbors. The smell of freshly brewed coffee stirred me from the sofa, but Ella's absence gnawed at me. Whatever was in that envelope must have been significant to make her leave so abruptly. I tried calling her, but her phone was off. I spent a sleepless night, tormented by thoughts, trying to make sense of it all. After returning the borrowed items, Christian and Calixta left, sensing my need for solitude. I took a long, hot shower, hoping to clear my head, but the relief was fleeting. With Sunday approaching, I considered contacting the police. I didn't know any officers personally, but I had acquaintances at the courthouse who might help. In our financial setup, Ella and I had one credit and one debit card. The debit card was for daily expenses, and the credit card for larger purchases. We paid off both cards monthly. If Ella was in trouble, she might use these cards. Credit card purchases usually appeared in our account after a few days, but debit transactions showed up within hours. With growing concern, I checked our accounts. The credit card showed no unusual activity. The debit card, however, showed a gasoline purchase in Pennsylvania near the Ohio state line, then another in Illinois, and a $300 cash withdrawal in Cedar Rapids. As I sipped my third cup of coffee, the harsh reality set in. Ella wasn't coming back. She wasn't just taking time to think, she was running away. Despite loving her and not wanting harm, I couldn't support her actions. With emotions swirling, I realized our relationship was at a crossroads. By mid-morning, I had canceled both cards. An hour later, I reported the Mustang stolen to the police, omitting that my wife had taken it. I mentioned a gasoline card used in 3 states, hinting at a western direction. I felt guilty deceiving the police, but it seemed the only way to get their attention. They seemed more interested in dismissing me than investigating. After the calls, I inventoried the house. Only Ella's purse and a small overnight bag were missing. What could she have packed that made her departure so mysterious? I spent hours debating what to do about her phone. I hoped canceling the cards would force her to contact me. Lost in thought, lunchtime passed unnoticed. My son brought pizzas for dinner. Despite leftovers from the barbecue, the hot, salty pizzas tasted good. We gathered to discuss the events. I shared everything with Christian and Calixta, and they supported me unconditionally. That night, I found some comfort sleeping in my own bed, but it was clear Ella had no intention of contacting me. Meanwhile, Christian and Calixta started their summer jobs at a local tree pruning company. It was hard work, but they embraced the challenge, enjoying the sense of masculinity their new job brought. As they drove off in the Jeep, I stood on the porch, waving goodbye with a heavy heart. After finishing my coffee, I wandered aimlessly around the empty house, still grappling with the breakup of our relationship and searching for answers that remained elusive. Eventually, I decided to contact my workplace and request a week's vacation, hoping to find time to sort out the situation and gain some clarity amid the chaos. Driving a truck to deliver gravel to a local quarry had become tedious. Despite the decent pay, the work was physically demanding. I was often hot and covered in dirt, but at least the job required no complex decisions. I simply picked up the cargo, delivered it, and got paid. In the early days of Ella's job at Prescott Casualty Company, We attended numerous corporate events together. These included parties and picnics where I met some of her colleagues. However, over the past 6 months, we had stopped attending these events. Ella never mentioned them anymore, and they no longer seemed important to her. Although I wasn't great at remembering people, I still recalled Jack and Margie Gisson. Jack was a skilled carpenter, and Margie worked with Ella at Prescott Casualty. Realizing I needed answers, I decided to call the company. "Margie, this is Liam Connor," I greeted her. "Do you have a minute to talk?" Margie sounded very busy. "Hi, Liam. I'm really swamped right now. I hope it's not urgent." I hesitated before asking, "Ella didn't come to work today, did she?" Margie's response was unexpected. "No, we didn't expect her to come." I was curious. "Really? Why is that?" There was a long pause, and I sensed her discomfort. "Liam, I don't think I should discuss this with you," she said hesitantly. "I think you should talk to your wife." Disappointment filled me as I confessed. "I would love to, but I have no idea where she is." There was another long pause before Margie quickly interjected. "Liam, I'm sorry, but I have a lot of work to do. I have to go." And she ended the conversation abruptly, leaving me at a loss. A sudden sense of foreboding took hold, indicating something was going on at Prescott Casualty that Ella was deliberately hiding from me. Suddenly, it became clear why we had stopped attending company events. Ella was afraid someone might reveal her secrets or make me suspicious. Reflecting on the situation, I grabbed a cold beer and went out on the porch to collect my thoughts. Looking back, I realized there had been several signs over the past few months that I hadn't given much thought to at the time. One notable change was Ella working overtime several times a week. Initially, this didn't cause concern, but as it became a regular occurrence, it took on new meaning. Ella had also stopped discussing her work at home, and we had distanced ourselves from her colleagues. Despite these changes, she hadn't altered her appearance or bought new clothes or lingerie. I couldn't recall any suspicious phone calls or emails. Despite my growing anxiety, I realized I needed more help. Donald Curry, an old school friend who worked at the courthouse and had computer expertise, came to mind. I contacted Donald, explained the situation, and asked for his opinion. We agreed to meet at the glass door after his work to discuss the problem and find a solution together. Before heading out, I called Ron Will Home Builders and found out that Jack Gisson was working on a nearby apartment complex. I decided to visit him at noon, right after lunch. Usually, I had no trouble finishing a Taco Bell burrito, but today I only managed half, too preoccupied with thoughts of talking to Jack. Arriving at the construction site, I saw the crew still on their lunch break. Anticipation swept over me as Jack saw me, smiled warmly, and headed for my car. His friendly demeanor eased my anxiety. "Liam, good to see you," Jack greeted me. "I suppose you want to talk about Ella?" I nodded. "Yes, Jack. I talked to Margie today, but she refused to provide any information. I need to know what's going on, man to man, without any nonsense." I appreciated Jack's experience and hoped he wouldn't withhold important information. "Liam, to be honest, I usually tune Margie out when she talks about work, but here's what I know," Jack began solemnly. "Ella has been in a relationship with a married man from the office for almost 6 months. They tried to keep it a secret, but the rumors spread like wildfire. Margie and the other girls found out about it, and everything started to change. We noticed your absence from company events, and many suspected that Ella was deliberately keeping you away," Jack continued with a hint of regret. "I'm sorry, Liam. I can't offer more help. As for the identity of this guy, I don't pay much attention to these matters, but I can figure it out for you if you want." Appreciating Jack's willingness to help, I replied, "Don't worry about it, Jack. I'll figure it out myself. Thank you for sharing what you know." The new information from Jack made the situation painfully clear. I had ignored what was happening in my own home. Annoyed and hurt, I quickly disconnected Ella's mobile phone so she couldn't contact the house. Just as I was heading back inside, the phone rang. It was the Cedar Rapids police. They had found Ella's Mustang, parked at the bus station, and towed it to the impound lot. I could pick it up anytime for a fee of $300. Deciding to gather more information, I stopped by the police station before retrieving the car. There, I received a report on Ella's abandoned car. The report indicated she left the car and continued her journey by bus. Though her exact destination was unclear, I guessed it might be Westerly, despite not knowing anyone she had there. To protect myself and my children, I went to the bank and closed our joint accounts, opening new ones in my name only. I also reviewed the beneficiaries on our insurance policies, ensuring my boys were listed. Feeling a mix of emotions, I arrived early at the glass door, where I was to meet Donald. Absorbed by the gravity of the situation, I drank more than I should have before he arrived. "Liam, there was a divorce hearing today, and Ella was called to testify," Donald began. But as expected, she didn't show up. Marcia Ridgway is demanding a divorce from her husband Kelsey, citing adultery. She wanted Ella to testify about her affair with him. Without Ella's testimony, the divorce was delayed. I absorbed this, realizing things were falling into place. Marcia Ridgway had substantial evidence of her claims, including photos, videos, and recordings. She didn't rely on Ella's confession, but intended to humiliate her. Now, Ella's involvement seemed insignificant. Kelsey Ridgway had confessed when confronted with evidence, leading the judge to move forward with the divorce. In 6 months, it would be finalized, with Kelsey facing significant financial consequences due to child support and alimony for their 3 young children. After a long conversation, Donald left to return to his family. I thanked him for his help and ordered a coffee from the bartender. I considered grabbing a pickled egg from the jar on the counter, but remembered the party leftovers. Despite drinking too much, I managed to get home safely. Reflecting on the situation, I realized my drinking was a poor decision. I began wrapping ribs in foil to reheat in the oven. When I returned from a shower, I found Christian and Calixta had devoured the ribs, playfully teasing me until I pulled out another batch. Christian was particularly excited about the Mustang. After a 20-minute discussion, I agreed to let them take the bus to Cedar Rapids to retrieve the car. I gave them $600 for expenses. Calixta efficiently drafted a note allowing them to pick up the car, and I signed it, impressed by his confidence. The next morning, we had breakfast at IHOP before I dropped them at the bus station. I couldn't help but chuckle as they boarded, knowing they were in for a 2-day Greyhound adventure. It would be an invaluable life lesson. To ensure their smooth arrival, I notified the Cedar Rapids Police Department. With that settled, I focused on finding Kelsey Ridgway's office. This wasn't a quick task. As soon as Margie saw me, she reached for the phone, but time wasn't on her side. Without introducing myself, I implemented my plan. Security quickly intervened, pulling me aside before I knew it. Moments later, I found myself at the police station before a judge who swiftly sentenced me to county jail. There was no trial, just a brief exchange between me and the judge. I received a 60-day sentence, but I didn't care. It was a chance to break free. I called my sons to update them, hearing Calixta's giggle on the other end. Leaving the house unattended posed no problem, but reality often diverges from TV portrayals. Constant vigilance was necessary. Most inmates were uncooperative and unfriendly, with many noisy and unruly young people around. Surprisingly, the interaction between the younger prisoners and the more violent ones was minimal. There was no question of allocating a separate room, so I had to share a cell with a man named Gioconda. I didn't know much about his story, except that he found his wife in bed with another man and subsequently beat him. Despite our different backgrounds, Gioconda and I managed to get along well. I took the top bunk, and although the dining hall food emphasized carbohydrates, which I didn't like, Gioconda gladly helped by taking the extra portions. He turned out to be the perfect cellmate. 3 days later, Louis and Christian came to visit me. They reported that the trip to retrieve the Mustang was uneventful, but expressed a strong reluctance to travel by bus again anytime soon. Unfortunately, they didn't have any new information about Kelsey's whereabouts or their mother's situation. They did, however, bring 2 boxes of cigarettes as a gift. Christian, who doesn't smoke, thought they would be valuable for trading, influenced by too many movies. Gioconda was delighted when I gave him the cigarettes, explaining that smoking helped him control his weight during his prison stay. Knowing the boys were managing fine eased my worries. Christian, being the most responsible, left for college a week before my release, taking the minivan and leaving the Jeep for Louis. To celebrate my homecoming, Louis and I had lunch at Red Lobster. He was excited about entering his last year of school, though he would have to tackle some challenges without me. I had other plans brewing. The next morning, I walked past Margie's desk at work, and she was completely stunned. Her eyes couldn't believe what they saw. With a mischievous wink, I boldly entered Kelsey's office. But my triumphant return was short-lived. 3 hours later, I was back on the bus heading to the familiar walls of the county jail, now facing a 6-month sentence. Despite this, Lewis found humor in the situation, quickly calling Christian at college to share the news. Gioconda welcomed me back warmly. I felt a strange satisfaction, having made a better attempt at confronting Kelsey this time. Despite no feedback on my actions, I suspected I had made an impact. As expected, I lost my job, but with enough savings to cover the mortgage and daily expenses, it wasn't a disaster. Luis managed everything efficiently. During my time in prison, I received regular visits from family. Luis ensured I always had cigarettes for Gioconda. Ella's sisters also visited, showing sympathy but no signs of discontent. Despite not hearing from Ella, we celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas in prison. Less than a month before my release, Gioconda was set free. His wife and brother had moved to Florida, and he wasn't sure what to do next. Lewis saw an opportunity and invited Gioconda to stay with us until he settled down. Lewis even offered to help him get a job at the tree pruning company, but Gioconda preferred the warmer climate of the South. Interestingly, the night before Gioconda left, Kelsey Ridgway was found in an alley, claiming he was attacked. Ironically, I had a solid alibi, Gioconda himself. Upon my release, I decided I'd had enough of Kelsey. He had moved away, and I had no desire to pursue him further. I enrolled in a course to learn to drive large trucks, a relatively easy task compared to driving dump trucks. While waiting for Louis to start at Auburn, I spent time repairing our house. Though I considered selling it, the complications of joint ownership deterred me. Ella remained silent since she left, providing no information about her whereabouts. Louis took the Mustang to Alabama, finding its appeal to the opposite sex undeniable. Eventually, I found a couple willing to buy the house despite its troubled history. Their lawyer assured me that Ella's signature wasn't needed, and I saw no reason to disagree. All I wanted was to break free from this property without complications. Using the down payment from the house sale, I invested in a drilling rig with a sleeping area. Before I knew it, I was on the open road, feeling free at last. Surprisingly, I never felt the urge to divorce Ella. The idea didn't appeal to me as I had no intention of remarrying. My time in prison taught me that the prospects of meeting intriguing women were limited, and Gioconda's influence made me reconsider any other alternatives. Interestingly, Ella didn't seem to be interested in a divorce either, since I didn't receive any surprises in the mail about it. It wasn't difficult for me to find a job, and fortunately, I wasn't desperate for money, which allowed me to be selective about the loads I took. I tried not to transport anything frozen, live, toxic, or explosive. In addition, I avoided winter trips north of the Mason-Dixon line. Getting used to the tricks of trucking didn't take long, and to my surprise, I realized that I really liked my new life. During one of my trips to South Dakota with a load of agricultural equipment, the situation took an interesting turn. Fortunately, it was June, so the weather didn't create any problems. After handing over the cargo, I continued my way south, turning off I-90 for about 5 miles until I came across a place called Belly Up. Despite its modest appearance, the parking lot was filled with large trucks and cars. Intrigued, I decided to stop and take a look. To my delight, I discovered the diner offered breakfast all day, with generous portions and incredibly tasty dishes. Although most of the customers were locals, it was clear that several truckers had found this hidden gem. Looking forward to my meal, I asked the waitress to bring me my favorite dish along with a cup of coffee. As I settled into my seat, I noticed 3 widescreen televisions scattered throughout the diner, each showing different programs that didn't attract much attention from the patrons. A lot of political videos were being broadcast on the screen closest to me, and one in particular caught my attention. It depicted a charismatic candidate named Robert, with a confident demeanor and iridescent silver hair. To my great shock, standing next to Robert, dressed like Jackie Kennedy and smiling broadly, was none other than Ella, my Ella. Before I could fully absorb this unexpected sight, I was distracted by the arrival of the largest plate of potatoes I'd ever seen, brought by a waitress named Betsy. "Here you go, big boy. Anything else you need? Tabasco?" she asked playfully. Curiously, the hot sauce was cleverly hidden behind the pepper shaker, making Betsy giggle as she revealed its hiding spot and poured it onto my plate. Intrigued by what I had just seen on the TV, I asked Betsy, "And who is that woman standing next to this chatterbox?" She snorted and replied, "Oh, that's Robert's new candy." Rumors had it that Robert needed a wife to support his political ambitions and counter speculations about his orientation. Pouring an excessive amount of Tabasco on my potatoes, I remarked, "She seems a bit mature to be considered arm candy, but I guess when time is scarce, you can't be too picky." I couldn't deny Ella's beauty and my personal belief that older women often make more fulfilling romantic partners. Do you agree? Watching her on TV, I couldn't help but appreciate her transformation. Her once blonde hair was now an elegant light brown, styled perfectly, as if she had just left an elite salon. Her flawless makeup and tailored suit accentuated her features beautifully. My attention shifted back to the TV, but my waitress had returned to her duties. The diner was crowded, a testament to its popularity. The coffee in my cup was topped up twice as I enjoyed my meal, leaving no leftovers on my plate. Though tempted by the attractive pies, I was too full for dessert. Betsy removed my empty plate and placed the check in front of me. When I asked, "Is he going to win the election?" she replied with a disappointed twinkle in her eyes, "We're doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. He has influential supporters with deep pockets, but we don't have enough votes or funds to stop him." I reached for my money clip, a slight grin on my lips. Betsy noticed and asked, "What's funny? Do you know something?" Grinning, I replied, "Oh, maybe I have some information." Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Did they really get married?" I asked eagerly. She nodded and added, "Believe it or not, their wedding was even broadcast on television as a reality show." Continuing with a knowing smile, she said, "They skipped the traditional honeymoon, waiting for him to officially take office." I placed a $10 bill on the counter and said goodbye warmly. "Don't worry. I'm not here to cause trouble or meddle in matters that don't concern me." As I stepped out, Betsy leaned over and asked, "Is there something you want to tell me, sir? Can I get some sleep first?" I nodded, appreciating her understanding. When I left the diner, a smile remained on my face, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Settling into my truck, I looked forward to much-needed rest. I noticed Betsy watching me through the window. Just as I began to drift into sleep, I was awakened by an insistent knock on the door. Initially, I ignored it, hoping it would stop. "Go away," I muttered, but the knocking only grew louder. Reluctantly, I opened the door to find a stern woman in a raincoat standing in the dark and rain. Trying to make out her face, I grumbled, "I didn't break any laws. Leave me alone." Unfazed, she said firmly that Betsy asked her to talk to me. Despite the weather, she insisted on a few minutes of my time. Resigned, I agreed to listen, though I longed to return to my rest, to the much-needed rest. "Please, just 10 minutes, she begged, with determination in her look and tone. Annoyed by her insistence, I answered bluntly, "I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. Go and find someone else to talk to." There was disappointment in her voice. "Damn it, it's about Ella. Meet me inside in 10 minutes. Surprised by the mention of Ella's name, I reluctantly agreed to her request. As she closed the door, a half-smile flashed across her face. The restaurant still had a lively atmosphere, and the number of visitors remained decent. Intrigued and a little doubtful, I decided to comply and headed inside to meet her, hoping to get answers about the mysterious situation with Ella. Near the entrance to the cafe, there was a special area for rain gear and boots, soon to be needed for the snow. I noticed her sitting in a booth by the window with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. Her straight, shiny black hair, with a small white streak on one side, caught my attention. Her tan complexion suggested she was a lover of outdoor activities, accustomed to the elements. Her well-tanned skin lacked the softness typically seen in more delicate natures. She seemed to be in her 30s or closer to 40, with high cheekbones and no noticeable makeup. Sitting in the booth opposite her, I extended my hand in introduction. "Liam Connor," I said. She shook my hand, replying, Sally Wilmot. Out of politeness, I offered her something to eat and asked, "Do you want something to eat?" She declined with a polite smile. "No, thank you. I had a signature dish 3 hours ago. I don't think I'll be eating for a while." Sally then explained her reason for wanting to talk. "Betsy mentioned that you might have some information about Robert and Ella." Perplexed, I asked, "What's so important about Ella?" Sally replied, "My brother Kevin is running against Robert." After a pause, she added, "So yes, it's my personal business." Sally clarified, "It's not just personal. Kevin represents our neighborhood's interests, and we believe that many people may not get fair opportunities if Robert is elected." Puzzled, I replied, "Okay, but I still don't see the connection between his wife and all this." Sally sympathetically agreed, "We don't understand either. All we know is that something is off." She explained that their election committee tried to inquire about Ella but found nothing significant. Robert's team remained silent, not disclosing any details. "It may be nothing, but we're getting desperate, and Betsy mentioned you might shed some light on this." Amused by her insight, I chuckled. "I guess I shouldn't try professional poker if the waitress reads me so easily," I said. Sally leaned back, confirming with a knowing look. "Yeah," she said, "you really know something. So, will you tell me?" Finishing my coffee, I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. "Well," I began, "I'll be happy to answer your questions." Expressing relief, Sally replied, "Oh, good. It's driving us crazy. So how do you know Ella?" With a sigh, I confessed, "She is my wife. We've been married for over 20 years and never divorced. Although I haven't seen her in years, unless she divorced me without my knowledge, we're still legally married." Sally seemed shocked and momentarily speechless. After a pause, she asked, "What was Ella's maiden name?" "When she got married, her maiden name was Connor," I replied. "This woman didn't even try to hide it." Sally hesitated, clearly stunned. "My God," she exclaimed. This news seemed to cause a storm of emotions in Sally. Meanwhile, Betsy rushed to our table, attracting attention. Overcome with embarrassment and happiness, Sally kissed Betsy on the lips in excitement. She then headed to a quieter part of the restaurant to make a call. Betsy, blushing slightly, leaned towards me and whispered, "I haven't seen her so excited in 5 years." As I headed for the exit, the rain had stopped, bringing momentary relief. But before I reached my car, Sally grabbed my arm, stopping me. "You can't leave yet," she said firmly. "You should talk to Kevin." I reluctantly agreed, realizing a short conversation wouldn't take much time. "Okay, a few minutes then," I agreed. To be honest, I'd rather leave it all in the past. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "Since I mentioned it to Betsy, how long will it take Kevin to arrive?" Sally assured me, "He will meet us at my house. Do you want to come with me or in your truck?" I replied, "I'll follow you. I prefer to have my own transport." The Jeep Sally was driving looked at least 10 years old, but I felt more confident relying on my own car. After driving a few miles along an old gravel road, it became clear our destination was a weather-beaten house. The well-kept area indicated someone was inside. The lack of a normal lawn was replaced by gravel. Noticing the absence of other cars, I assumed Kevin hadn't arrived yet. Inside, my attention was drawn to a designated place near the door for hanging wet coats and storing shoes. It seemed practical, especially considering the numerous coats and boots. The house's interior resembled a classroom more than a traditional living room, was worth sticking around a bit longer. Instead of the usual nightstands, there were desks and computers, replacing table lamps. While I was looking at this unique setting, my gaze met with 3 teenage boys who were staring at me, breaking the silence. Sally introduced me. "Hi guys, this is Liam. He's here to help Uncle Kevin." "Liam, these are my sons," she said, pointing to each of them. "This is Tracy, the oldest, followed by Tyler, and the youngest is Tanner." Each of them smiled politely and nodded in appreciation. I couldn't help but chuckle, finding the situation quite funny. "I have to admit," I chuckled, "it's a little strange that all their names start with the letter T. It amuses me because I also have 2 sons named Christian and Calixta." Tyler was the first to break the silence and speak, perhaps interested in our connection or wanting to start a conversation. At the mention of my sons, Tyler inquired about their whereabouts, ignoring his mother's disapproving look. "Christian goes to Texas A&M, and Calixta goes to Auburn," I replied casually. This simple statement seemed to electrify the atmosphere, causing excitement in the room. Tracy, who had seemed rather restrained up to this point, suddenly became animated, showing energy similar to that of an Energizer rabbit. "I'm really going to College Station in August," he exclaimed impatiently. Curiosity aroused, he asked how long Christian had been studying there and what he was studying. Sally gently put her hand on his shoulder, urging him to take a breath and calm down. "Take your time, my dear. I'm sure Mr. Connors will have plenty of time to answer your questions." They didn't know yet that Tracy had received a full football scholarship and had already agreed to participate in the ROTC program. Meanwhile, Tyler's application for admission to the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis was accepted, and in a year, he will begin his journey there. Sally had experienced grief when her husband, a brave soldier of the National Guard, tragically died in the Persian Gulf 5 years ago. Tanner chose not to divulge any additional information, and I, respecting his decision, refrained from further questioning. The youngest of the boys had not yet decided on his choice, but his mother, always diligent, made sure that he was not distracted from his studies. While I remained in the dark about the reasons for Kevin's delay, the next hour was spent in conversation with Sally's sons on various topics. Sally watched from the sidelines, noticing how a bond was forming between us, unlike the one I had with my own children. The time spent with Sally's children reminded me of how much I missed my own boys. Kevin finally arrived, accompanied by 2 assistants. After introductions, Sally handed out assignments to her sons, and the adults gathered at the kitchen table. Doubt about my claim to be Ella's husband was evident, but I had no intention of arguing. When I got up from my seat, thanked Sally for the coffee, and said goodbye to the boys, Sally strongly protested. "Damn it, Liam, sit down." The remaining faces at the table sank into hushed silence. Sally took the conversation into her own hands, demonstrating the demeanor of someone aiming for political office. "Liam, do you have a marriage certificate or any evidence to support your claim that you are married to Ella?" With a quick movement, I pulled out a wedding photo from my wallet. Although time had passed, Ella's age and hairstyle had changed, but her unmistakable presence was still noticeable. My gaze shifted to one of Kevin's assistants, who had a laptop in front of him. "Visit the Civil Registry Office of Berks County, Pennsylvania. They should have online access to marriage certificates from 1960 to 1990. Search by my name, Liam Connors," I instructed. The assistant turned the laptop screen to Kevin, saying, "August 17th, 1979. Confirm if this date matches." Kevin seemed visibly relieved by this revelation. I nodded in confirmation. "Good luck finding the divorce records. As far as I know, and everyone else knows, I'm still married. Feel free to explore this issue in as much detail as you want." "I don't care about this situation," I said, feeling that the conversation was becoming monotonous and uninteresting. This time, no one objected when I got up to leave. "Do you mind if I sleep for a few hours at your entrance before leaving?" I asked. Sally replied, "No, not at all," and walked me to the door. Looking back, I saw that Kevin and his comrades were deeply immersed in their political affairs. I silently said goodbye to them. The boys waved to me, or maybe they didn't. When I left the room, an hour later, I heard the sounds of Kevin and his entourage leaving. I thought the night passed quietly, but my peace was interrupted by another knock on the door. Sally hurriedly climbed into the cab, dressed in a flannel nightgown, and motioned for me to be silent, putting her finger to her lips. We were far enough from the house that the boys wouldn't overhear, but it looked like Sally just wanted us to keep quiet. We spent at least an hour together, passionately declaring our feelings. Though somewhat uncomfortable, the sleeping area in the truck cab was adequate at best and only served for rest. Given the circumstances, I made the most of it. Sally left as quietly as she had come, without exchanging a single word. When the sun greeted the day, there was another knock on the door. This time, Tanner invited me to have breakfast with them in the house. Fortunately, boys and men have similar food preferences, and Sally was well versed in preparing such dishes. Talking with the guys for an hour, I began to feel light and comfortable. Moreover, I felt comfortable enough to ask Sally for permission to take a warm shower before leaving. An hour later, I finally found myself on the road again, albeit for a short time. Soon, before reaching the highway, I was stopped by the local sheriff. It turned out that Mr. Kevin wanted to continue talking to me. I followed the police car to the establishment where Kevin was waiting for my arrival. He was just having breakfast and kindly invited me to join him. Betsy came in, brought coffee, and winked knowingly at me. She seemed to have a closer friendship with Sally than I had initially assumed. Obviously, Kevin's legal advisors were interested in my continued presence. Resorting to the hackneyed phrase, "time is money," I tried to dissuade him, but he just grinned and continued the meal. It would be easy to agree to everything and disappear without a trace, but considering the events of the previous night, I decided that it was worth sticking around a bit longer. It would be in my best interests to stay a few more days. The party assured me that they would pay for a motel room and meals, but they didn't have enough money for more. This gave me a valuable chance to refresh my wardrobe, pay unpaid bills, and manage my banking affairs. Using the convenience of Wi-Fi, I took advantage of this opportunity by sending a couple of emails to my boys and promptly paying all the remaining bills. While folding the second batch of laundry from the dryer, I was startled by the unexpected appearance of Sally. "What are you doing, Liam?" she exclaimed. With an innocent shrug, I replied, "Just folding laundry. But you had to leave, remember? You said you were leaving this morning." "Plans have changed. Your brother asked me to extend my stay here for a few more days. I only came to see you last night because I thought you'd be gone today. But I understand that my presence here is undesirable for you." From the way Sally stammered, choosing her words, it became clear that she had not intended any relationship other than a one-time meeting and did not know how to act in this situation. I was amused by her disappointment and saw in it a reason for some levity. Moreover, after the morning conversation with Kevin, I sincerely thought about buying a house and settling in this area on a permanent basis. Kevin presented a tempting picture of the situation, but it's not easy to deceive me with empty promises. I decided to have a frank conversation with Sally, inviting her to sit on a bench next to the dryers. "Your brother insisted that I extend my stay here for a few more days, just until they can agree to pursue Robert," I explained sincerely. "I made a promise to keep my distance from you and the boys until everything is settled. It wasn't my intention to embarrass you or make you feel uncomfortable." Sally shook her head and replied, "That's not the point, Liam. The boys genuinely like you. They have already asked when you can come again. When I told the guys about your departure, they were a little disappointed. Tyler even asked me to talk to you about the possibility of staying for a while longer. I apologized if my friendly intentions had led to complications. They reminded me of my own children, and it was easy for me to find a common language with them. I didn't mean to get you into trouble. I must admit I didn't make things any easier when I approached your truck last night. Of course, you have complicated the situation. Why did you come to me?" I asked. Sally shrugged, showing a hint of embarrassment, and replied softly, "I'm not sure. It's been 5 years since my husband died." After 5 long years spent without solace and passion, it seemed like the perfect moment for such an opportunity to appear, especially since you had to leave today. There were signs of excitement in Sally's behavior again, and she exclaimed, "Why didn't you leave?" Disappointed, I quickly gathered up a stack of folded underwear, handed it to her, collected the remaining things, and then returned to my motel room. Making love to a woman in a normal bed is undoubtedly much more convenient, but most of all, I was pleased with the joint shower. By the end of the first week, all the boys received t-shirts and hoodies with the symbols of Texas and Auburn. Sally kept one of the Auburn t-shirts for herself, although it was a little too big for her. Meanwhile, I didn't pay attention to political maneuvers. Kevin and his team seemed to be doing just fine without my involvement. But then, the news about Ella's mysterious story surfaced, and the media began to present it as a sensation. Robert's supporters made futile attempts to downplay the significance of these revelations, while they continued to deny or ignore the accusation. The situation only worsened, which led to a rapid drop in Robert's approval rating. I refrained from participating in political affairs until one morning I was visited at the motel. A tall, fair-haired woman with impeccable posture stood on the threshold. Even though I was only wearing boxers, I invited her in. While I was taking out a stack of $500 bills, her eyes eluded me, but I carefully followed her every subtle gesture. Dressed in a dark suit with a white shirt and modest black heels, she gave the impression of an experienced professional. "My name is Mila," she introduced herself. "I'm a lawyer from Levitt's Brothers in Sioux Falls. I believe you are Liam William Connor." The fact that she knew my middle name caused a wave of anxiety. Feeling that the matter was urgent, I took my leave and went to the bathroom. Closing the door to the bathroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that the noise of the water hitting the toilet tank reached me unmistakably. Despite the initial intention to restrain myself, mischief forced me to go for a subtle act of humiliation. Less than a minute later, I left the toilet and returned to Mila at the table. She asked, "Was it necessary?" I replied with a hint of amusement. "No, but from your tone, it was possible to assume that we would stay here for a long time." "I apologize. I was just trying to maintain a professional demeanor," Mila exclaimed, her disappointment palpable. "What do you need?" "Our company represents Robert. We have recently discovered that your marriage to Ella Connor has not been legally dissolved, and we would like to rectify this situation. There are laws in the state that allow for an accelerated dissolution of marriage under certain circumstances. We believe that with your assistance, we will be able to take advantage of these laws," Mila explained. Perplexed, I asked, "So you want me to divorce my wife?" Mila answered simply, "Yes." Embarrassment clouded my thoughts, and I wondered about her motives. Why do I need this? My answer seemed to take Mila by surprise, perplexing her. She didn't seem to expect such a question at this stage of our conversation. Although I wanted a divorce, I was careful not to reveal this information to Mila. She sat pondering my words before I made a request to her. "Miss Mila, please give me a direct explanation in simple terms why my wife and I no longer live together. I need complete honesty without embellishment. If you can do that, I'll think about continuing our conversation." She leaned back slightly, unbuttoning the top button of her blouse, and began to explain. "3 years ago, your wife had an affair with a work colleague. When she found out about it, she ran away because she could no longer face you and your children. She hasn't spoken to any of you since." Her straightforward explanation startled me, and I replied, "Everything is clear enough." "So what exactly is the matter?" Mila sighed, realizing my awareness of the news. "If you follow the latest developments, you probably know that Ella and Mr. Robert are in a difficult legal situation. Unfortunately, we cannot fix what has already happened. We hope that we can ease her situation by facilitating a quick divorce," explained Mila. I raised an eyebrow. "That's right. And remind me again, what will I get out of all this?" "Freedom," she replied. I chuckled softly. "Well, I'm quite happy with the way things are now. You'll have to convince me that my life will get better and not remain the same." She paused, trying to understand my point of view. "What do you want, Mr. Connors? Do you wish to receive financial compensation? If so, in what amount? Please give me something to work with." I leaned over, looking at her intently. "What are the terms of the divorce you are proposing?" Her answer was unexpected. "None. That is why the process can be accelerated," Mila explained. "There is no exchange of money, no division of property, no custody dispute. Both sides simply leave with what they have at the moment without owing anything to each other. This is a clean and final decision." Curious, I asked, "How long does it usually take?" "Less than 90 days, she replied. "This means that the decision will be made before the elections." A knowing look flashed between us, and she, though with difficulty, recognized its significance. "Do I need to see my wife?" I asked, hoping for reassurance. "No," Mila replied. "Moreover, we'd rather you didn't." The next question seemed to strain her, and she sighed before I answered. "Yes, good. I agree to this, but on one condition. You must pay my accommodation and food expenses until the process is completed." A smile appeared on Mila's face, showing that the result exceeded her initial expectations. Even though I had the opportunity to bargain for a significant amount, the prospect of getting freedom without financial encumbrance at the moment was very attractive. "I can prepare the necessary documents and give them to you for signature this afternoon," she assured me. "Everything should be fine. I will need to consult with my lawyer, but I don't expect any problems. Although I don't have a legal representative, I wanted to discuss this with Kevin first. Could you give me your contact information? I assure you that if my lawyer has any problems, I will contact you. If you don't get a call, please bring the documents directly to me. Having crossed this task off the list, I felt relieved. Since I had to have breakfast, I walked her to the door wearing jeans and no shirt. When she was leaving, I noticed Sally on the other side of the parking lot, but before I could signal her, she quickly sped away. I quickly shaved, got dressed, and headed to Belly Up. Betsy gave me a disapproving look as she poured me coffee. Will they at least give me a chance to explain everything? I asked. Not to me, Mr. Connors, but you better come up with a good story for Sally. Breakfast was hot, but the conversation was cool. I finished eating as fast as I could and immediately called Kevin. Unfortunately, he was out of town, but we managed to talk for 20 minutes. To my surprise, he was delighted with the whole situation and advised me to accept it. However, he stressed that it is necessary to obtain copies of all documents. He exuded self-confidence no matter how the situation turned out. I asked him to contact Sally on my behalf. Giggling uncontrollably, he finally ended the conversation. There was a large car wash station not far from Highway 90. I spent more than an hour thoroughly cleaning and vacuuming and finally carefully waxing the car. It would be easier to pay for professional service, but I was in desperate need of therapy. Before returning, I decided to have lunch at Cracker Barrel. In this way, I hoped to avoid the wrath of Betsy, who this time strategically parked right outside my room door. When I pulled up, Sally got out of the Jeep, looking a little confused. It was clear from her expression that Kevin had talked to her. Over the next 2 hours, she sincerely apologized to me, acknowledging the severity of her guilt. Sometimes guilt can have its positive consequences. By the time Ms. Mila returned with the papers I was supposed to sign, Sally had already left. To my surprise, Mila insisted on handing me a check for $10,000. While Robert's campaign continued to fall, my divorce application moved smoothly through the legal system. Tracy was now living in College Station, and a friend was looking after him. The timing was perfect, and I officially divorced just before the election. Kevin came out the winner and expressed his gratitude, promising to reimburse me for the help personally. It seemed to me that I hadn't done much, but I jokingly told him that I would consider our candidacy even if he introduced me to his sister. In response, Sally playfully hit me on the arm. Unfortunately, the events unfolded not in favor of Ella. After the election, due to an unexpected turn of events, charges of bigamy were brought against her. But before any action could be taken, she mysteriously disappeared. Disappearing seemed to be her specialty. Unfortunately, I never got to see her or talk to her after that. I sold the truck and used the money to buy a house in a small gravel pit near Huron. Sally and I got married at Christmas, and all 5 of our boys were present. Betsy moved into a 2-story trailer house, assuring us that she would take good care of it. According to the ultrasound, we were expecting a girl. Does anyone have any suggestions for names for girls starting with the letter T? Regarding my own story, I am a native of India who unfortunately faced a whole heap of troubles. Previously, I held the position of SE captain, a job that required long business trips, usually for 3 months, as I worked on ships. But the beginning of the pandemic complicated my financial situation. Flights were suspended, and no country allowed us to return, which led to an even longer separation from my homeland. I had no idea that during this time, my wife, with whom I had been married for 16 years and had known since childhood, had started a relationship with another man. To my horror, I discovered that she had been intimate with this man 3 times before I found out. The details related to this revelation are complex and extensive, but unfortunately, I have no one to share them with because of the shame I feel. I cannot share this with my friends or family. Additionally, the cultural spirit of India can be unforgiving, with people prone to hasty judgments. I am tormented by doubts about the possible rumors that may spread if this news becomes public. Taking advantage of a slight easing of the restrictions associated with the pandemic, I returned to my hometown in July 2020 and lived with my family until December of that year. Then, I was forced to return to work. Time flew by quickly in those days, and we managed to maintain a semblance of happiness. But after returning home in March 2021, the first week seemed relatively calm. Yet, I had an uneasy feeling about a man my wife met during our usual morning walk. The way he greeted us made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't help noticing that my wife blushed every time she saw him. Over time, I noticed that my wife was becoming more secretive. She hid information about some phone calls, despite my presence during her conversations. One day, while driving home after lunch, her phone rang, and the caller ID displayed a name I didn't recognize. I asked about the caller, waiting for her reaction. As expected, she tried to deceive me by claiming it was a fake call. This display of deception caused me anxiety and unease. Driven by a desire for answers, I decided to check her phone when the opportunity arose. One day, while she was in the shower, I looked through her phone. Given our marital relationship, we often used shared phones. But as I delved into her phone's contents, I discovered that another man's contact details had been deliberately erased. This further fueled my suspicions. To gather more information, I decided to turn on her phone's conversation recording feature. From that moment on, I regularly checked her phone, hoping to find unusual calls that could provide answers. Finally, on August 2nd, 2021, the fateful day arrived. Returning home after finishing my business, I noticed that my wife hastily ended a telephone conversation. Taking the opportunity, I discreetly checked her phone. To my considerable surprise, I found an incoming call from an unfamiliar number that lasted 29 minutes. Intrigued, I studied the number carefully but didn't find any associated names. Understanding the significance of this number, I wrote it down for future reference. After listening to the recorded conversation, I was filled with surprise and disgust. The dialogue I overheard was discouraging, with a tone of disrespect and indecency, treating her as someone who exchanges her honor and dignity for money. This revelation was shocking. Without hesitation, I confronted her in the kitchen, determined to investigate her possible connection with this man. My accusation took her by surprise, and she seemed genuinely confused. She confidently denied any romantic or emotional connection with him. I told her that I had overheard their conversation, which was full of obscene words. She offered a rather ridiculous explanation, saying it was just a friend with a habit of talking that way. This explanation seemed improbable, especially given that she had always emphasized respectful communication and loyalty. Despite my distrust, she remained adamant, convincing me there was no romantic relationship. To avoid revealing the secret recording of her calls, which could worsen the situation, I decided to be patient and wait for more evidence. On August 4th, 2021, the second decisive day arrived. That day, I received 4 more recordings of conversations, which confirmed my growing suspicions. The newly obtained records left no room for doubt, clearly indicating her active involvement in a physical relationship with another man. Armed with these indisputable proofs, I again came into conflict with her, presenting the records, which became an inevitable trap for her and made her feel cornered. Not knowing what to do, she admitted with great reluctance what had happened. Divorce in our country was a rare occurrence, which greatly aggravated the seriousness of the decision that now faced me, especially considering that we had an 11-year-old son. Everything was complicated by the fact that my work was connected with long business trips. I was gnawing at the thought that during my absence, she might have been with someone else, and this further complicated the situation. Before this incident, she constantly emphasized her loyalty, and I had no reason to doubt her. She honestly confessed, leaving no room for doubt, and said that she felt a strong attraction to this man. She said that during the difficult times of the pandemic, when I was often at sea because of the uncertainty of the situation in which we found ourselves, this person provided her with support. The long separation that we experienced made the situation even worse. I was overcome with anger. I could not get rid of the feeling of betrayal. While I was at sea, worrying about the welfare of my wife and son, she entered into an intimate relationship with another man. In addition, which further complicated the unpleasant picture, this was not an isolated case. It was shocking that even while I was working on the ship, A third incident occurred, which happened 4 months after my return home. The date has been preserved in my memory, July 21st, 2021. She admitted that this was the last case and said that she was going to stop the illegal intimacy. At the same time, she was afraid that another man might divulge the truth to me. From the point of view of logic, such an explanation looked unconvincing, since the second man was not only married but also had the profession of a lawyer, which of course could not but affect his reputation. This terrible discovery happened just 2 days after my birthday, which further increased the heartache. It turned out that the preparation and organization of their secret meetings took place on the very day when I celebrated the next year of my life and was fulfilling my official duties. It turned out that he rented a hotel room and they spent time there together. The weight of this exposure shattered me and I was consumed by intense mental pain. She begged me to find the strength to forgive her for this offense. Now, more than ever before, I wanted to trust her again. But the foundation of our faith had been seriously damaged. In an attempt to erase all traces of evidence, she deleted the dictaphone, recording that I had discreetly installed on her phone. But she didn't know that I kept a copy in a separate place, so it became my indisputable proof. After listening to the conversations she had with another man, it became clear that there were no hints of ending the affair in them. This understanding destroyed my trust in her sincerity. That night, I could not accept the idea that she was sleeping in her bed, and she begged me, hoping for reconciliation. Their conversations kept popping up in my memory, and I could no longer forget or reduce the seriousness of what was happening. Even if she tried to reduce its importance, it was painful for me to realize that my wife, who had an affair, was now talking about her desire to return to her former life as soon as possible. She believes that if you constantly focus on the past, it will only complicate everything even more. I felt completely broken and humiliated because of her infidelity. It was difficult for me to find a person to whom I could confide and share my emotions. Now I feel trapped, not knowing what steps to take next. Divorce seems to be the only possible option. I turned to a therapist for help, but our conversation on the phone lasted only about 15 minutes. As a result, he recommended antidepressants to me, but I still haven't started taking them. Why should I take medication when my wife couldn't stay faithful to me? I saw her talking to another man, making it clear that she did not want to communicate with him anymore, but my anger and frustration remained the same as before. People like me, as sailors, often feel deprived of the attention of the working class. Now it seems that even our own community is not giving us the support we need so much. Here are some updates and explanations. After returning in March 2021, I decided to give up working on ships. Instead, I am actively looking for a remote job on land that will allow me to work from home. This will give me the opportunity to spend more time with my family, especially with my son. Feeling insecure during the first conversation, I made her make a second call to another man to clarify. I lacked complete information about their participation in the war effort at that time, and I wanted to achieve complete clarity and understanding. That man had no doubts about this situation. Immediately after that, my wife blocked his number, and since then, they have not communicated. It's been 2 weeks. I asked her to name the dates, and she named them, although not in writing. When I asked for details, her answer remained the same. At the same time, she gets upset and starts crying. I have to admit that she never blamed me for what happened. In fact, since that momentous second day, D-Day 2, when I found out the whole story, she took full responsibility and admitted that it was entirely her fault. She regrets that she did not seek the advice of a therapist before making this disastrous choice. At that time, we both believed that there were no problems in our marriage, but now we are faced with this problem. From the conversations I overheard, I learned that another man was constantly encouraging my wife, trying to justify an extramarital physical relationship by saying that they do not ignore their own families. These conversations seem to normalize such behavior. The man, who was married and had due to an unexpected turn of events, charges of bigamy were brought against her. But before any action could be taken, she mysteriously disappeared. Disappearing seemed to be her specialty. Unfortunately, I never got to see her or talk to her after that. I sold the truck and used the money to buy a house in a small gravel pit near Huron. Sally and I got married at Christmas, and all 5 of our boys were present. Betsy moved into a 2-story trailer house, assuring us that she would take good care of it. According to the ultrasound, we were expecting a girl. Does anyone have any suggestions for names for girls starting with the letter T? Regarding my own story, I am a native of India who unfortunately faced a whole heap of troubles. Previously, I held the position of SE captain, a job that required long business trips, usually for 3 months, as I worked on ships. But the beginning of the pandemic complicated my financial situation. Flights were suspended, and no country allowed us to return, which led to an even longer separation from my homeland. I had no idea that during this time, my wife, with whom I had been married for 16 years and had known since childhood, had started a relationship with another man. To my horror, I discovered that she had been intimate with this man 3 times before I found out. The details related to this revelation are complex and extensive, but unfortunately, I have no one to share them with because of the shame I feel. I cannot share this with my friends or family. Additionally, the cultural spirit of India can be unforgiving, with people prone to hasty judgments. I am tormented by doubts about the possible rumors that may spread if this news becomes public. Taking advantage of a slight easing of the restrictions associated with the pandemic, I returned to my hometown in July 2020 and lived with my family until December of that year. Then I was forced to return to work. Time flew by quickly in those days, and we managed to maintain a semblance of happiness. But after returning home in March 2021, the first week seemed relatively calm. Yet, I had an uneasy feeling about a man my wife met during our usual morning walk. The way he greeted us made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't help noticing that my wife blushed every time she saw him. Over time, I noticed that my wife was becoming more secretive. She hid information about some phone calls despite my presence during her conversations. One day, while driving home after lunch, her phone rang and the caller ID displayed a name I didn't recognize. I asked about the caller, waiting for her reaction. As expected, she tried to deceive me by claiming it was a fake call. This display of deception caused me anxiety and unease. Driven by a desire for answers, I decided to check her phone when the opportunity arose. One day, while she was in the shower, I looked through her phone. Given our marital relationship, we often used shared phones. But as I delved into her phone's contents, I discovered that another man's contact details had been deliberately erased. This further fueled my suspicions. To gather more information, I decided to turn on her phone's conversation recording feature. From that moment on, I regularly checked her phone, hoping to find unusual calls that could provide answers. Finally, on August 2nd, 2021, the fateful day arrived. Returning home after finishing my business, I noticed that my wife hastily ended a telephone conversation. Taking the opportunity, I discreetly checked her phone. To my considerable surprise, I found an incoming call from an unfamiliar number that lasted 29 minutes. Intrigued, I studied the number carefully, but didn't find any associated names. Understanding the significance of this number, I wrote it down for future reference. After listening to the recorded conversation, I was filled with surprise and disgust. The dialogue I overheard was discouraging, with a tone of disrespect and indecency, treating her as someone who exchanges her honor and dignity for money. This revelation was shocking. Without hesitation, I confronted her in the kitchen, determined to investigate her possible connection with this man. My accusation took her by surprise, and she seemed genuinely confused. She confidently denied any romantic or emotional connection with him. I told her that I had overheard their conversation, which was full of obscene words. She offered a rather ridiculous explanation, saying it was just a friend with a habit of talking that way. This explanation seemed improbable, especially given that she had always emphasized respectful communication and loyalty. Despite my distrust, she remained adamant, convincing me there was no romantic relationship. To avoid revealing the secret recording of her calls, which could worsen the situation, I decided to be patient and wait for more evidence. On August 4th, 2021, the second decisive day arrived. That day, I received 4 more recordings of conversations, which confirmed my growing suspicions. The newly obtained records left no room for doubt, clearly indicating children claimed that his wife showed no interest in intimate life, but this does not justify the fact that my wife entered into an intimate relationship with him. Since then, I have not encountered him directly since he did not live nearby. I used to accidentally bump into him during morning exercises on the hill. Having warned him loudly and clearly, I made it known that if I met him again, I would reveal their secret to everyone. On the same day, I anonymously wrote a letter to the man's wife, detailing their affair. Additionally, I tried to contact her via Facebook since I did not have her phone number. The presence of my wife in such proximity caused me strong moral strain. I was getting more and more annoyed with her, even going so far as to call her a serial cheater. In response, she began to defend herself, claiming there were no grounds for such an accusation. According to her, what happened was just a mistake that could only be regretted and had only happened 3 times. Now, I am trying to understand how she could have acted so frivolously. I understand that she may fall under the influence of other people, and in the past, I have repeatedly intervened to help her in such cases. Unfortunately, I wasn't around this time. I noticed traces of guilt in her behavior when she was at home during the affair, but when she talked to him on the phone, she seemed to turn into a completely different person who completely neglected her family. I keep asking myself, what is it about this strong feeling of falling in love or infatuation that makes people make such disastrous choices? I have already thought about meeting this man more than once, but I cannot ignore the fact that he is a lawyer and apparently very insidious. It is likely that he has various tactics that can drag me into unnecessary litigation. The possible consequences in India, especially if a person has the right connections and sufficient financial resources to invest in solving such issues, are difficult to understand. Court cases can drag on for years, and there is no certainty that justice will eventually be served. To my great surprise, his wife contacted me via Facebook and expressed her sincere distress. She admitted that she had never suspected his infidelity. She asked if she could listen to the audio recordings I had. I suggested that we meet in person to listen to them. We agreed to meet in the evening at an inconspicuous restaurant outside the city where none of us would be recognized. When we finally met face to face, I saw his wife for the first time. As we shared our stories of betrayal, a special bond formed between us. Our shared experience brought us closer together. When I played the recording for her, she was heartbroken by the truth. I asked about her future plans, and she confessed that she was unsure of what to do. Her financial situation was dire since her husband was the main breadwinner, and a divorce could be disastrous for her. Having reached a mutual understanding, we parted ways, deciding to meet again the next week. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in touch. Communicating with someone who had experienced similar betrayal was therapeutic. Her husband, compared to me, had more money and connections, which was significant in our environment. Despite his wife's attractiveness, it seemed that his infidelity stemmed not from dissatisfaction with what he had, but from a desire for more. Before our scheduled meeting, we often corresponded, and feelings began to develop between us. When we met the following week, it was clear that there was mutual attraction. We continued to meet regularly, and during one meeting, I initiated a kiss that led to an intimate relationship in my car. As this affair developed, I began to justify the idea of reconciliation with my wife, believing it would somehow restore balance. Nevertheless, I decided to continue my relationship with this man's wife. Our affair continued for about 2 more months until her husband called me and demanded that I stay away from his wife. Without hesitation, I contacted her and asked how he found out about our secret. She explained that during a heated argument, her husband accused her of infidelity, and in retaliation, she revealed our affair. To my surprise, she apologized for inadvertently putting me in a difficult position. After a while, my wife found out about our affair and began demanding that I immediately end it. Initially, I was disappointed with the other wife for betraying me by revealing our infidelity, but soon my irritation shifted to my wife and her cheating partner as their hypocrisy became clear. Despite my wife's sincere requests to stop the affair, I ignored her and continued it. I remained indifferent to her desperate pleas. I ended my affair only when the other man got tired of our relationship and threatened me with a lawsuit. Knowing his ability to navigate the legal system, I realized he could make my life very difficult. At that moment, I made the final decision to end the affair with his wife, recognizing that I lacked the financial capacity to engage in lengthy litigation. Currently, I am making plans to reconcile with my wife, finding some satisfaction in knowing that she is aware of my relationship with another man's wife. My former affair partner and I stay in touch, but have mutually agreed to end the physical aspect of our relationship. Her husband continues to threaten me with lawsuits, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and uncertainty. We have decided that ending our intimate relationship is in our best interests. It was better for both of us.